How would you say that flipping has changed your life?
The very minimum that I'd get would be 1,000, and I'd say my sweet spot would be around $2,000 to $3,000 profit.
So, as someone who is dedicated full time to flipping cars, you could easily clear 6 figures a year.
Yeah, for sure.
Where are you finding most of your cars, and how are you identifying which cars are the best to buy?
Good question. Good question. Honestly, that's probably the biggest question when it comes to flipping cars too.
Cars are a very unique market when it comes to reselling or flipping compared to almost anything else, because even if the consumer or the buyer seller knows nothing about cars, they kind of know what the value is because the value is published.
If you're someone that is just starting with the whole business, I would say start as cheap as possible. Cars, there's a lot of moving parts that if you pick the wrong car, it could potentially be a bad investment for you and it can kind of mess you up. And the biggest part of it is more so the inspection part.
If you could share with our audience your number one top flip of all time, what would it be?
Hey, flippers, are you still managing your reselling business the old-fashioned way? In today's fast-paced market, leveraging technology isn't just an advantage, it's a game changer. That's why we created Ivy Flip, the ultimate app designed to supercharge your reselling business. With Ivy Flip, you can effortlessly source products from Facebook, OfferUp, and Craigslist, all from one easy-to-use platform. Say goodbye to missed opportunities and hello to instant notifications when great deals are posted. Our cross-posting feature lets you list your items on multiple marketplaces with a single click, maximizing your exposure and sales potential. Plus, our AI-powered scam detection ensures you spend your time on genuine listings, not fake ones. Don't let outdated methods hold you back. Embrace the power of technology with Ivy Flip and put your reselling business ahead of the competition. Click the link in the description and get a 1-week free trial of our app now.
On this episode of the Couch Pod, I'm joined by Jamaul Salley of Flipping University. He helps people achieve financial freedom through learning how to flip cars. Jamaul, thank you so much for being on the pod. And if you could give our viewers a little bit of your background, I think that would be a great place to get started.
You're welcome. And thank you so much even for having me, Charles. First of all, for me just getting started with the whole flipping thing, honestly, for me, it didn't even start up as big of a vision as I thought it would be. It was more so just me working, literally just a full-time job. I used to work at Sprint actually at the time as just like a retail consultant, like salesman basically. And at the time, I just kind of still felt a little stuck though, where I always kind of had like more of an entrepreneurial mindset where, just doing that on a day-to-day grind, it just didn't feel like it was going to be enough as it was. So I had a friend that ended up kind of introducing me to the whole flipping thing, and he was kind of like my beginning mentor in a way that got me into the whole thing. But that was probably like 6 years ago or so when I first got started, 6, 7 years, and kept going through all that time. Eventually got into actually doing it in full-time business way. And yeah, now I just coach other people to how to do the same thing without messing up like I did when I first got started.
Right. There's no need to make mistakes that other people have made in the event that they're willing to teach you how to avoid those mistakes. You can avoid a lot of pain and misery just by, getting the right advice. How would you say that flipping has changed your life in the past 6, 7 years?
So I'd mainly say for the freedom aspects, honestly. I mean, I will say I do like cars in general, even before I started flipping cars. Always just liked cars. I don't know if people that watch this podcast have seen stuff like Fast and the Furious, movies like that in the past. But, stuff like that, I've always been interested in it. So when it came to flipping cars, it was already like, somewhat of a passion for me to be able to basically buy something, try it out, almost like in a way rent it, have fun with it, and then sell it for more profit later, which was a cool aspect in itself. But the freedom aspect of it, when I got into doing it for full-time basis, was the cool thing. And honestly, why I even had like that entrepreneurial dream, just because you don't have to think about, oh, when can I take the day off, or when can I go on a break or something like that. Like you're your own boss. So it's not just with this, but flipping cars that you can do that with. But I saw this as my main avenue to kind of get started with that.
And fast forward 6, 7 years, and you're able to make a full-time living off of your work with the coaching and car flipping. How many cars do you flip in a given month today?
I will say it used to be more when of course, when I was more full-time into things, it used to be like 8 to 10 or so in a month or more. But now, because I'm doing a more like part-time basis, it might be like maybe 5 to 6. And, since I'm also doing a bit of a balance, really.
Got it. So as an individual operating at your peak, you could flip something like 8 to 10 cars a month.
Yeah, or more.
or more.
Mhm.
And what was your average profit per flip in that era?
So I'd say the very minimum that I'd get would be 1,000. Really, even now, like I wouldn't want to go for a flip that I can make less than that. And I'd say it'd be between there to like I'd say my sweet spot would be around there to really more so around $2,000 to $3,000 profit would be like the type of car that I would usually go for, which usually are a little bit higher priced cars. Maybe we can get into that, later in the video, whatever. But with in terms of like price lines for cars and stuff. But usually it would be like sweet spot would be 2,000 to 3,000 would be what I would really try to go for.
So, as someone who is dedicated full time to flipping cars, you could easily clear 6 figures a year.
Yeah, for sure. And really that's part of what I teach now, like for people that teaching them to take it to that next step and do things in a more efficient way. And honestly, that's kind of like the big thing that a lot of people kind of miss, which I mean, if you're just getting started, it's not big of an issue. You can kind of try different things. But when you're going full time into things, you have to think about the best way to use your time, so that you're not wasting energy doing it in the wrong things.
Absolutely. So one thing I know is that car flipping versus flipping almost anything else is much more regulated. Like obviously, like if I sell you a couch, you just give me cash and I give you the couch. Whereas with cars, there's this entire title transfer process. You have to register with the state. And I believe there's also a limitation on how many cars you can flip in a given year without having to register as a dealer. So could you explain a little bit of the sort of legal back end of this process to the audience?
So as one quick thing, as you mentioned, usually most states, there's some actually like a few states in the US that don't actually have that restriction where you could flip as many cars as you want basically in a year. But let's say like New York, I believe the top amount that you could flip in a year would be 5. And I'd say the way that you can get around that in a legal way and still it'd be a little bit slower, but because usually when you flip a car, as you mentioned, there's paperwork that's involved. You have to like buy the car, you register the car, then you sell it to someone else, and then you have to keep doing that same process. But the way that you can still do that same thing is, let's say after you fill up your amount that you could sell in a year, just registering in someone else's name instead. So let's say if you have a wife or a son or other family member or even, friends or whatever you want to do it with as well, you could register it in other people's names to do the same thing basically. And it's still legal. But there's a different avenue also that is a little bit quicker than that. So first top of you avenue would be getting a dealer's license. And of course, with that, you have to have your own dealer's lot and different things like that. Like you have to actually own your own dealership, but there are ways where you could actually get into someone's dealer's lot, not really into the dealership, but basically work as like a representative under that dealership where you can still have some of the advantages like being able to sell as many cars you want in a year and being able to buy cars from dealer auctions and different things like that. You could still have all those advantages, but you don't have to have your own dealer's lot that you're paying for per month.
You're currently registered as a dealer in the state of New York, is that correct?
I'm a dealership as well myself.
You met all the formal requirements for having a dealer's lot, etc.
Yes, well, I did it the way that I just mentioned, where, I don't have my own dealer's lot, but I'm under a dealership where I'm doing all the same things.
And what exactly are the costs associated with starting up a dealership? Let's say if someone was interested in going like full-fledged into it, like what sort of capital outlay should they expect?
So it kind of depends on the state. Because some states like New York, it's a little bit more to it. But generally speaking, for most states, you need around the same thing. There's usually some type of physical lot yourself. So usually it needs to hold at least like 1 to 2 cars at least as a very minimum. But let's say for that, of course, you have to generally pay or put aside a certain amount per month for that. For New York, there's lots that I've seen that it could really be like $1,000 to $2,000 a month you might have to pay. Along with that, then you also have bond that you have to usually get just a dealership as well. So with that, it's a little bit more to it because you have to basically have your credit trying to get into the thing themselves, like in basically just in a good standing. Let's say around 700 and above usually would be good to kind of start it up. And then so let's say honestly for everything together, having a startup cost of at least like 5,000 for like the minimum state would be good. But honestly, for states that's like bigger states like ours in New York, you might need a little bit more. You might need like maybe 10,000 or so just to start up. But it really depends. Honestly, even some people, they'll literally go to a different state, just to have like lower startup costs just to get started and then maybe, change to a different market after that.
That would be the startup cost. What about ongoing costs associated with having a dealership?
The main thing, I mean, with ongoing stuff would be just the lot. Really, that's usually the biggest expense. Of course, if you have employees and different things like that, then you're going to have to keep up with that as well. But just to start, the main cost is the lot. So for someone that was just getting started, I would just say, as small of a lot as possible. If you could even just fit 2 to 3 cars on it, would be fine. But, that might be for most states around $2,000 to $3,000 possibly, maybe sometimes less. Sometimes it could even be like 1,000, but it depends on the state.
Got it. So for someone who is more established as a car flipper and looking to take things to the next step, it's not a crazy high capital cost, but there definitely is some cost associated with taking things to that next level. But as you mentioned, there are these kind of workarounds that you can deploy to make money flipping cars without having to put up that much money up front. So it's like a problem that you can solve later.
Exactly. So, I mean, there's different avenues to it. And honestly, for anyone, I wouldn't just say just jumping straight into opening your own dealership would be the smart thing. I would say dabbling in, just buying cars from private sale, the same way that you probably would from, buying couches and stuff to flip as well. And then once you kind of get that going and you start seeing like, all right, this is something I really want to do, then you kind of scale up. And especially by then, you could probably have enough capital, as you're flipping cars and stuff like that, put into getting your own dealership. But that would be down the road, or if anything, even if not full on opening your own dealership, doing something like I mentioned where you could just be under someone else's, you don't have as much capital that you have to keep up with.
Got it. New York is probably one of the most restrictive states when it comes
Yeah.
to buying and selling cars. I can imagine.
Luckily, yeah, that's how it is with everything. We get the most restrictions, get the highest expenses. But I will say, it's not all bad. It's a good market to be in. There's a lot of people around the area, stuff like that. We're not in the middle of nowhere, so not all bad.
A lot of upside as well. High risk, high reward.
Exactly.
So it seems like a good intermediate, so if you're a flipper, you're in a state where they regulate the number of cars you can flip, that great intermediary move between starting your own dealership is to go operate as a member of someone else's dealership. So what is that process? Is this like a formally accepted or known kind of relationship? Like how, if I'm interested in finding a dealer to work with, like how do I go about that? How did you find your relationship, for example?
Yeah, so I will say, to be honest, it's more of a back end type of thing. Usually, if anything, you'd actually have to kind of like directly know someone that might have their own dealership, whether it be a family member or a friend or anything like that, that can kind of bring you in. But actually, that is part of what I help people with because of the fact that I've been part of the dealers for a while myself as a member. I also help people with just getting in themselves too. So now I believe with the dealership that I'm in, I think I probably bring in about like 70 people or 70 or 80 people or so just doing the same thing. It's not a lengthy process. Like generally speaking, we get on a call all together. Like they meet with the owner of the dealership as well as me. We'd be on a Zoom call together, and you just kind of giving information, the credentials and stuff like that. There's a one-time payment that they make for like lifetime access to stay under the dealership, and then that's it. And then they're in the whole thing. And then after that, they not only do they get access to be able to sell as many cars they want in a year, but they also get to have the dealer auction access, which is like one of the big reasons why people really do it. Because usually when you're flipping cars, there's like two different avenues. Is either going the private and doing the whole go to Facebook type of route, which isn't bad in itself, but it takes a little bit of time, especially if you wanted to kind of scale up with things. But the other route is going to dealer auctions where all the cars are lot, where you could just check out all the cars there. It saves a lot more time, and you could potentially bid on them and get them later. And usually a lot better deals than like an auction that any person could go to, like a person from the public can go to.
On the question of sort of licensing, let's say I'm in Texas and the dealer that I want to work with is based in New York. Does that have bearing on me being from Texas, or like do I have to be in New York? Like how does that all work?
Yeah, good question. I mean, no, you could actually be from anywhere inside the US, I would say. I've never had anyone that's been outside of the US jump in with it. But I mean, there's been people that have signed up from Texas or Cali or from any parts. And it really doesn't matter. I mean, regardless, it's still coming under the same dealership. When it just comes time to making the sale and you're selling the car to the other person, it's, of course, that process is a little bit different when it comes to flipping a car where you're documenting everything. But it's still simple. You're just putting your name as a seller under the dealership and then selling the car the same way. But the state that you're in really doesn't matter.
So it's kind of like you're a contractor or employee to the dealership in that case.
Yep. And that's actually how it would be for tax related purposes too. You're basically a subcontractor under the dealership.
Interesting. And given how many dealerships there are and how many employees a dealership might have or contractors dealership might have, like a single dealer could potentially have hundreds of subcontractors working underneath them.
You could. For the dealership that I'm under, they actually will probably open another dealership just literally to help more people get in. I mean, it's not like it's a cap of how much they can have in one dealership, but just to make things a little bit easier for certain states, maybe even making it where they can themselves a little bit easier if they need to. But like I mentioned, it's not really like the cap of how many people they can have under it. So you could keep going with it if you needed to.
And this is all legally white area, right?
Yeah. I mean, I've been doing it for about like 4 years now, doing that same thing myself. And I mean, there's been no problems with it. Like I said, I pay taxes off it like regular income. As just as the same thing I'm talking about though, just as a subcontractor under the dealership. And honestly, like I said, I feel like for most people, even before getting your own dealership, that's actually what a lot of people do. They'll start flipping cars for a little bit themselves, and then they'll go to this step where, it's kind of like a little bit more that they're doing. They're flipping more cars per month, they're getting more deals in cars and stuff like that, but then they don't have that full expense of having a lot themselves and having their own dealership. So a lot of people, they kind of try this out first before they move to that next step. Even actually people that want to get into the rental car business as well, they're doing things like Turo and stuff, they'll potentially get into this just to be able to get cars to rent out and different things like that.
I didn't even think of that angle. I guess it's kind of like getting your real estate license so you can start buying and selling houses yourself without paying the commission.
Exactly. You don't have to have a broker or something that you're paying someone else to get. Like, you could do it all yourself instead.
Yeah, I think it's an absolutely necessary mediary step between being a casual flipper and being a full-fledged dealership. Because if you're capped at 5, then you look at the cash flow that's necessary to sustain a dealership, given all the costs, you probably have to go from 5 to like 25, 30 flips a year minimum to make that kind of cash outlay worth it. Whereas if you're able to partner with a dealer and operate underneath his license, maybe you can get away with just like 10, 15 a year, and that still being worth your time and energy.
And you could do a lot more. Like I said, there's no limit. For me, especially as I mentioned, when I was going full time, I was doing a lot more. And honestly, it was enough to be able to still run my own dealership if I wanted to. But truthfully, for me, it depends. For me, I didn't want to have the whole dealership with the lot and everything. I kind of wanted to take different strides, even going to the YouTube route, as I mentioned. But for some people, that's the next step for them, where they go from here, they already learned the fundamental skills to really do the business right. And then boom, they just step into getting their own lot and they just kind of scale up with things from there. As a quick thing, I will just say, like, you do have to make sure that you're joining under the right person. And that's why, I have my own avenue to help people get into it. But, and actually, as a thing, we could potentially put that in as like a link in the description if you want to, Charles, just as a way, for people to get in the same way that, other people are doing it in my channel. But just to say that, just because, you don't want to get under the wrong dealership and they're just not treating you right, so you want to make sure that you're joining someone that you can trust yourself,
Yeah, someone that has offered that kind of relationship and service to other people in your position as a track record. What are some of the risks associated with joining the wrong person then?
Let's say you just joined someone that maybe they started up their own dealership, but then they didn't have like all the things in order, where the dealership gets shut down or something like that in the future. Like, if you join that person, then, you might be paying them. I will say a lot of people, if they did something like that, where they offer people to come into the dealership, they might charge per month instead. And honestly, the amount that the dealership that I'm charging is like, just to get into the whole thing, is a lot less than what other people would even charge. Some others, honestly, they might charge close to what you might have to pay for a lot. Like, they might be charging $800 to $1,000 a month just to stay under the whole thing, which is not that much for the one that I'm in. But that's just the problem. Like, if you get into the wrong thing and then the dealership is doing some illegal practices themselves, or, something like that, you don't want to end up putting your money into something like that and then you end up potentially losing it. So that's why I say that you want to make sure that you're joining something that, like you said, has a good track record of helping other people and doing the same thing themselves too.
Got it. So the issue is not that they could interfere with like any individual transaction. Like, let's say you're buying and selling a car using underneath their license. It's not that they can like keep your money from that transaction, but it's more the risk of like, you've made an investment and that dealership isn't going to be around in the future.
Yeah, that would more so be it.
Understood. So pivoting topics a little bit, let's talk about sourcing. Where are you finding most of your cars, and how are you identifying which cars are the best to buy?
Good question. Honestly, that's probably the biggest question when it comes to flipping cars too. I'm pretty sure it's the same for flipping couches, but the main thing is the money that you're making is off the purchase, not off the sale, realistically. But I'd say, when I first got started, it used to be primarily private sale, going through even Facebook and stuff like that. Now it's like, it's primarily through dealer auctions, and then it's a little sprinkle of private sale, going through Facebook, or even potentially like, if it's someone I know, that's selling their own car, maybe I might purchase it from them just to flip it, stuff like that. But most of it is through dealer auction.
So a dealer auction, obviously, it's like a normal auction, except it's limited to people with dealers' licenses. Where are they like getting their inventory? What can you expect your experience to be at one of these dealer auctions?
And I will say it depends a little bit on with the one that you go to, but you go to one auction that could be, there's probably, for anyone watching, there's probably an auction right around the corner from where you are. You might have not even noticed it yourself, but if you searched up something like Mannheim or Odessa, those are like big auctions that are in most states. And if you go, there's probably a good amount, probably at least like 1,000, 2,000, like even more. Like the bigger auctions might have like 5,000 or 10,000 cars that are all just stacked up there, ready to be viewed. And generally speaking, how it works is you go there, they're all kind of lined up there for like one day. Well, not even for the whole day, kind of like for the whole week. All the cars are kind of stockpiled there, and generally speaking, it's other dealerships that's bringing the cars in. So it's if you trade in a car to a dealership, or if it's a bank repossession, or maybe the car got like salvaged because you might have brought it into an accident. All those cars, they basically get stockpiled at the auction, and it's dealers like us that can go to that auction, check out the cars, and then bid on it with other dealers that's there. And then if you purchase it, hopefully you purchase it for the right price that you can sell it later.
It's interesting that the dealer auctions are mostly dealers selling to other dealers. Why is that? Like, if I'm a dealer, why would I sell the car for like another dealer to pick it up and make money off of it? Presumably, like, if there's value in the car, I would sell it myself. No.
There's two different types of dealers, I will say. There's dealers that are wholesale dealers, where that's literally all they do. They just purchase from, let's say, an auction, or even from people on the streets, and then they'll sell it to other dealers, but that's all they can do. They don't have the license to be able to sell it to the public. And generally, because of that, it's actually cheaper cost to be able to get into being that type of dealer. So let's say instead of having to have your own lot for like a retail dealer where you can sell to the public, you might just have to have like an office space that could even be like a room in your house for some states. So sometimes it could actually be really cheap just to get into being a wholesale dealer. That'll literally be their whole game, just purchasing it even from one auction and then selling it to another auction. And usually speaking, it will be less profit that they make per car, but usually they also try to get more cars that they sell per year. So maybe they only make 200 or 300 or 500 maybe off of a car, but they might try to get 10 cars plus selling at that auction where they'll still get good income off of it. Then the other dealers are retail dealers, where those are the ones that, you might go to a used car lot and pick up a car there type of thing. And for those people, it depends. It still could be the same thing where they just want to get a quick sale off of it. To be honest, some dealers, they just don't want to deal with the public. Like, let's say maybe there's a car that they purchased and they don't want to go through the whole process of like cleaning it up and fixing it up and doing all that to get it ready for someone to check it out. If you're selling it to another dealer, it's a quicker thing. It's not really a headache. You just bring it to the auction, the dealer purchases it, and then you get your check, and that's it. There's nothing in between that, so it kind of depends.
Got it. So like there are a mix of distribution channels for used cars, and most dealers tend to specialize in one type of distribution over another.
Usually, yeah, between either being a wholesale dealer or a retail dealer. Retailer, they could do both, but the dealers that have their own car lots and stuff, most of the time they usually more so go for selling to the public. But here and there they'll sell it to dealers as well.
Right. They just don't want to go through the hassle. And different people have different kinds and scale of distribution, right? So if you have a Honda sitting on a GMC lot, maybe it's harder to sell that than if you put that in the Honda dealership.
Exactly. And that's actually that's a big point right there too. Like, let's say, because it's not just used car dealers that goes to these auctions. There's new car dealers as well, like the Hondas and Toyotas and Lexus dealers that'll be there as well. So those type of dealers, like maybe, they're selling $10,000 plus cars. They might not want to trade came in for one of their cars that might only be worth like 5,000 or so. It might not go well with the rest of their inventory. So for that car, they might just take it in, bring it to an auction and sell it to another dealer, rather than having the whole hassle of, selling it to a person and getting the right person to fit that car.
Makes total sense. It's really just markets in motion, right?
Yeah, exactly.
One thing I've heard is that car auction space is harder to play in nowadays than it used to be. And like, generally that the used car market is just not what it used to be, especially during the pandemic, right? I mean, during the pandemic, these are crazy times. Maybe now this is more a regression to the mean than a decline in the car flipping market. But if you could speak on the trend that you're seeing in sourcing and the demand for cars as well in the past couple of years, that'd be great.
As you mentioned, it's definitely been completely different than like pre-pandemic. Like, I mean, to be honest, I started like right before the pandemic. Well, in terms of goal time with things, I only got like a small taste of what it was like pre-pandemic, where from what I hear from other dealers that are in the business for 20 plus years, they could have just went to the auction and like basically every deal that they got was like an amazing deal like that. Now it's a little bit, I wouldn't say like scarce, but you have to be a little bit wiser with what you're picking when you go to the auction. And so I wouldn't say it's horrible anymore though. Like I was doing business through the pandemic times as well. And that was where things were really tough. Like, I would say honestly at that point, I'd probably have better chances going to Facebook or something like that to buy a car off of somebody else off the streets than going to an auction where other dealers are overpaying for their cars, to sell it to someone else. Nowadays, it's not back to what pricing was before the pandemic, but it's a lot better. I'd say now it's like I can go to the auction, or I could try to go, and source a vehicle to sell. It won't be as much of a hassle. I could usually find one pretty quickly. So I have to be like diligent with what you're picking, which is like a big part of the process when you're flipping a car. But it's not like going weeks or something like that, or constantly trying to search for a car just to get one and you can't find anything. So definitely a lot better.
Cars are a very unique market when it comes to reselling or flipping compared to almost anything else, because even if the consumer or the buyer seller knows nothing about cars, they kind of know what the value is because the value is published, right? You can just go look up your make, model, condition of your car,
Yeah.
and they'll tell you this is private resale value, this is the value on the yacht, on the lot, this is the value in your state. So people kind of have a sense of like, how much is my thing worth? When it comes to couches, you might have purchased that couch for $5,000 and it has one rip in it. And you just assume that like the value in that couch is like totally diminished. And you might be right. Most importantly, that information is not published anywhere where it's easy for you to just go look up. And, couch models are not like car models where it's like very well documented in a database somewhere. Here's the value of this couch. And so because of the amount of information that is out there about the value of cars, there's less, therefore, information asymmetry, and therefore a little bit less of an opportunity to make high profit margins when flipping. But because of the value of the car, you're dealing with an item that's like, I don't know, $10, $15, $20,000, right? Even if you can make 10% on the value of a $10,000 car, that's $1,000. Whereas like something that's more common in couch flipping is you can pick up a couch for $200 and then turn around and sell it for $1,000, which is a 500% profit margin, right?
Yeah.
Which is absolutely insane to think about in cars. So the margins are smaller, but given the total value of the car, the overall profit can be the same. It's very interesting to think about when it comes to cars. It's all about these margins, right? Like a 10% margin on a car is very different than a 20% margin on a car.
Yeah. So I was just going to speak on that really quick, because the interesting thing too, I mean, you're definitely right. Like the tougher spot when it comes to cars is, like you said, there's a lot of information that's out there. Someone could very easily, just go on Kelley Blue Book, for instance, a website most people know, to just search up the, price of the car. And it would be a lot harder for you to kind of like overvalue your car to someone just because of that exact thing. I will say it still could happen. Like there's people on there that are out there that don't know about things like Kelley Blue Book, so you might be able to sell them, things are a little bit overpriced here and there, but most people are not. Most people are tech savvy enough to just quickly search up. But I will say, profit margin wise, it depends on how much money you're investing generally for how much profit percentage you can get back. Because let's say if you got, generally speaking, actually, the cheaper cars can get a better profit percentage back for the car. Let's say if you buy a car for like around $1,000, it's a lot easier, even $2,000. It's a lot easier to get double your money. And let's say you buy a car for 1,000 and flip it, and make another 1,000 and sell it for 2, or buy a car for 2,000 and sell it for 4 instead. It's a lot easier to do that actually, and that's like reasonable stuff that you can do, rather than buying a car for $10,000 and then flipping it and selling it for 20. Like that's probably not gonna happen too often. It depends. Like let's say, all right, the more you go up in pricing, generally speaking, the more you can actually kind of make off of the profit. Because let's say you might be able to make $4,000 off of a car that you bought for $10,000, but at the same time, it depends, because you're not getting as much profit percentage as what you would for potentially like a cheaper car.
Yeah, that makes total sense. If you're dealing with a car, it's worth $1,000. What's another $1,000? Someone's just looking for something drivable. They have $2,000 in their pocket. They're willing to fork that over for you. That's 100% profit on a $1,000 car. Whereas if you're talking about $10,000, the margins may look different, but you're still able to make that $1,000 or $2,000 flipping that car because of the value of the car overall.
And generally speaking, the more that you invest, realistically, most people wouldn't want to buy a $10,000 car. Well, the good people doing the business wouldn't want to pay $10,000 for a car and only make 1,000 off of it. They want to make more. They might want to make 4,000 or so instead. Like you just mentioned, it's still not the same as making 100% back off your money. Like buying a car for 10,000 and then getting it and selling it for 20,000, that's probably not going to happen,
If you had to recommend a business model for a flipper just starting out, do you think that they should be putting money into cars that are 1,000, flipping it for 2, or, getting these cars for 10, flipping it for 12, or, going, because there's this trade-off, right? How much cash or you're investing in a car and how much money you're going to make back, how long you're going to have to sit on it. So where's kind of the sweet spot for a car flipper?
So I would say if you're someone that is just starting with the whole business, I would say start as cheap as possible. I mean, even if you have like a lot of money to invest, you have 10,000 plus to invest, I would say just start with, I mean, you could even find a car for under $1,000, if you're patient with it. So I would just say start there just because you don't want to go for a car that's really expensive, trying to get the most profit off it. That's like $6,000, $7,000. And then you make some blatantly bad mistake and you put all your eggs in that one basket and you end up losing a good amount of money off of it. So you're better off, starting off with something small, keep risk low, and then after you kind of doing the business for a longer time, that's when you kind of go for a little bit higher price cars. That's usually what I would recommend. Let's say when the time comes where you're going into better cars, I would usually say like around the 3,000 to 5,000 cars, like cars that you could buy in that price range. Usually those are kind of like a good sweet spot because you can sell them pretty quick where people, generally speaking, people will have, let's say like a little over $5,000 cash to potentially buy a car where you could still make like a $2,000 profit or $3,000 profit even off of that car. And you could sell it quickly too, rather than even if you went for a car that's like a good amount more money where you're selling it for like 10,000 or 15,000, those cars, like, yes, maybe you might be able to make more money off of the car, which is nice. It depends off what your strategy is that you're trying to go for. But you also have to consider it's probably going to take way longer to find that one person that has $15,000 cash stacked up for the car.
Makes total sense. I mean, I refer to this in couch flipping as sort of getting your at bats. You want to get your reps in, keeping it really simple. By focusing on cars on that lower range, you minimize your risk on any individual flip and you get experience doing the flip. So you know better what to look out for, what are the red flags, what are the opportunities I can make money on. And if you have that as a foundation, now you can more confidently make investments in more expensive cars.
Exactly. Even if you got all the money, you want to be like, oh, I got all this money, let me throw it into something. And then, you end up losing money and you never want to do it again because of it. You're better off just lowering that risk. And honestly, that's how even I am. I've been doing this business for a while. I will say this with this business, there's a lot of risk and reward. There's deal out there that take a lot more risk than I even would. And that's just their strategy. Maybe it's worked for them. I'm someone that like, for how I see it, business in itself is already a risk. I don't want to be jumping into things, taking crazy risk. Like I want to go into things and do things that'll kind of, there's a little bit of risk, but not to the point where I'm going to like potentially lose money or, go negative off of, a car that I'm flipping or something. It all depends really off of what your strategy is.
One thing I've heard from car flippers and even the small dealerships that we work with is it's easier to get inventory at a dealer auction. It's like more consistent. Show up, you put in your bids, and you usually exit with at least like one or two cars. But that the best deals are private market. And the reasoning is something like when you go to a car dealership, you're in a room with a dealer auction, you're in a room with a lot of people that know a lot about cars and what their value is. And so it comes pretty close to parity. Whereas when you're dealing with the general public, there's more of this potential for information asymmetry. And so the problem with private markets is like, it's just like a slog. Like you're dealing with a lot of like scammers and bullshitters, et cetera, et cetera. But if you're willing to put in the work that you can find good deals on private markets like Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, et cetera. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's why I wouldn't really bash either. And like I said, that's why even now I still kind of mix and do a little bit of both. But like you mentioned, yeah, let's say if you're going to a dealer auction, first of all, you have to make sure that you have the right knowledge to pick the right cars. Because I mean, probably even more so with cars, there's a lot of moving parts that if you pick the wrong car, it could potentially be a bad investment for you and it could kind of mess you up. So that's one quick thing. You have to make sure that you're buying the right car and you're doing the right checks and different things like that. But as you mentioned, like there's plenty of other dealers there that's also competing for the same car. And just that in itself, yes, could make things a little harder to get the right pricing for a car that you want. But at the same time, though, the positive thing is just like all those cars are right there. It's a lot easier and quicker if you could get that in that aspect. And I will even say there's even auctions that you can use that are online too, where you don't even have to go to the auction in person. Like you can literally just be bidding from your phone at home, even while you're doing other things. And all you got to do is just check to see the listing coming up, and they'll do a comprehensive check themselves to see what's wrong with the car basically. Of course, as I mentioned, it's more competition for the car, and it's a little harder to do than to get an amazing deal. Let's say that rather than private sale where maybe you might be able to find that like 70-year-old grandpa that doesn't know the pricing of their car, and they're just selling it for some really cheap price because of it. It's not going to be as much of that, but as you mentioned too, those posts on Facebook and stuff like that and Craigslist or whatever it's not going to be too often you find those. So you have to do a lot of work to get those deals that come out.
Absolutely. You can find a diamond in the rough, but you got to be digging.
Yeah, constantly, and that's work in itself.
Absolutely. And, this is actually exactly the problem that we solve with the Ivy Flip app is you
Hmm.
enter in your parameters for the car that you're looking for. And then, it could be like 2004 Subaru low mileage
Hmm.
under $4,000. And as soon as something like that gets listed on Facebook Marketplace, OfferUp, Craigslist, we're working on support for Auto Trader and Car Guru. We send you the instant
Hmm.
notification so that you can be the first to reach out to the seller in case you're interested in that deal. So that's our instant notification service and why we're used by so many couch flippers, because they know that, the limitation to growing their business is typically finding inventory. And the thing about good deals is that the better the deal, the faster it moves. You don't have to be a rocket
Exactly.
scientist to know that a car that is massively underpriced is a good deal.
Yeah, that's huge actually. I mean, if you have some type of service to be able to help with that, and if you guys are doing that, that's where it takes out like most of the work. And realistically, yeah, the best deals. I mean, there still could be deals that could come up that maybe there might have been someone that listed a car like 4 weeks ago and they like overpriced the car for way too much, and then a month later they're like, all right, I just need some money, and they drop the price by some crazy amount. But most times it's the first listings that come up, like they'll be posted and they'll be posted for thousands less possibly, and you have to try to act on that ASAP. You gotta, the moment that post comes up, you better start sprinting into your car and driving over there as quick as possible to make it.
Absolutely. I mean, really good car deals like that can go in 20, 30 minutes. I've heard of it happening.
Yeah,
Might be interesting to get you to test our platform at some point and see what you think. So we'll have a
I
private
would try that.
conversation.
Yeah, that sounds cool.
We'll have a private conversation about that after. One big issue for people who want to get into car flipping is, what if you're not mechanically inclined? Like I've talked to some car flippers where they're like, I can tell you what's wrong with the car just by driving it. Like, I don't even need to look at the engine. I don't need to look at it. Just if I'm driving it, I can listen to the car. Like I know what's wrong with it. And then you have people on the other end of the spectrum, like they don't even know how to change like their windshield wiper fluid.
Yeah, yeah.
What do you do if you're not mechanically inclined? You don't know how to evaluate the bones of a car. How can you be successful in this hustle?
I would say for that question, you should just pick a different industry. No, I'm just playing. No, 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 it's definitely not it. Honestly, my audience really is that exact thing. Like I usually put that out there, even with my content. I'm someone that knows about cars myself and has done work on cars. But honestly, I don't love fixing cars. I like driving cars. I love cars in itself, but fixing them, I don't find joy being under a car for 5 hours, trying to wrench or something like that. That would annoy me, So most of my audience is actually those type of people too that, maybe they don't know how to do much even besides like maybe doing an oil change is the most that they know how to do type of thing. But the great thing about it, honestly, is that when you're just getting into flipping cars, like you really don't need to know that much. Like the biggest part of it is more so the inspection part where, and there's plenty of platforms too, that whether it be me that's teaching it or other, things on YouTube just to inspect the car the right way. But it's more so just about knowing the right cars, like exactly, what's up with that car before you purchase it so that you don't end up getting the car home and then end up finding out all these, the things that's wrong with it. But if you're doing things like, checking to see, maybe popping the hood and checking a certain place to see if there is an engine problem, taking it for a little test drive to see if there's like a problem with the transmission, which is another main part of the car. Stuff like that is what really is like the main parts of flipping a car. Because you could always, let's say if you know the car is right, there's cars that's out there that, maybe it only needs a detail, which is like you cleaning the car up, just cleaning the car and potentially selling it right after. Or it could even be maybe, and I will say this too as another quick thing, if you have a certain skill set, like maybe you don't have a skill set of fixing a car too well, but maybe you have a good skill set of either cleaning or painting even. There's people that have like are really good painters that, get into the flipping car space. And I mean, if you could buy a car that needs a paint job, you could probably buy it for way, way less money than, what someone else could buy it for. And then if you can quickly do that yourself, you're saving a lot of money and you could pop up those deals pretty quickly. Not every car that you buy for a flip has to be some car that needs a lot of like mechanical work. Like you can get cars that just needs maybe at most like a clean, and then you could sell it right after.
Absolutely. And this is why car flipping, couch flipping is so interesting to me compared to maybe some of these other resale markets because of the level of value add that can be a part of this equation. So for example, like if you're buying concert tickets to resell them immediately for $100 more, you are adding value in some way in that you're making that ticket available for purchase in the aftermarket, but it's not the same level of value add as picking up a couch, bringing it down 3 flights of stairs, cleaning it up, maybe fixing a couch leg, and then delivering it to the next person, right? And then With car flipping, it seems like there are 3 primary dimensions in which you could add value. The one is repairs, mechanical repairs, detailing, cleaning, and finally painting and sort of making it more marketable or presentable in some way.
It could even be the pictures, honestly. I mean, some people, they might have a good looking car, but the pictures are just trash. Just because of the pictures alone, nobody sees it. Like they might come up to the post on Facebook and they just scroll by it just because it looks like some easy scamming type of post, so it depends really. But like you said, there's value adds that you have to do with it generally before you sell it.
Absolutely. And that listing with bad pictures is gold for flippers, because as a flipper, we're looking for an opportunity to buy something that is underpriced, like relative to its actual value. A good chunk of that is just perception and marketability. So anything you can do, anything that the seller is not doing to increase the marketability of their listing is actually an opportunity for flippers to find something that's underpriced.
And I'd love to see more of that. Actually, I will say I haven't flipped the couch myself. And it's funny, I will say that you even contacted me because at some point I was looking to even potentially even do a collab, even like a video with someone with like house flipping versus car flipping, because I feel like both you can make some great money. It's just different avenues of flipping, but I feel like it kind of comes down to around the same skill set as you mentioned of like, all right, buying it, mainly purchasing it for the right price in the beginning, adding value to it, and then selling it for more money later.
Absolutely. I mean, that's how we got into the couch flipping market in the first place. Is we had a company where we're offering financial services to gig workers. A lot of these gig workers are unbanked, underbanked, no credit invisible, so on and so forth. And we're trying to offer them better interest rates on loans, but when we looked at their bank accounts, they didn't even have $500 in savings. So we're like, maybe we're solving the wrong problem. And so the question was, how do we put money into people's pockets? So we started researching side hustles. We came across couch flippers. And we asked them, like, how can we help you grow your business? And a lot of them came back and said the same thing, which is if I could find more good inventory, more good couches to flip, I could make more money. We're dealing in sort of a commodity product. Couches sort of sell themselves. Like people need couches, right?
Same thing with cars. People always going to need cars realistically. So the same thing.
Absolutely. And we're hearing the same thing from car flippers too. Like the reason, I'm only flipping 5 cars a month is like, I simply can't find more cars to buy. If I could find 10 that I could make money on, no brainer. If I could find 15, 20, 30, great. It's literally the limitation is they just can't find enough deals.
Exactly. And I'm pretty sure it's the same thing probably with houses. Well, I don't know. Maybe it's a little different because as you mentioned with cars, it's pretty clear. Like there's a lot of avenues out there. You could just see what a car's value is. So you can't just go like, you can't buy a car for like, all right, regular price and then just be like, all right, I'm just going to sell it for some crazy price later and try to make a profit. Is it even that same way with couches where like generally speaking, you have to make it a competitive price when you're selling it?
You'd be surprised. It's
generally
a sense of like what the value of a couch is, but couch flippers are much, much better at appraising the value of a couch than your average consumer, because your average consumer might buy 5 couches in a lifetime, whereas your average couch flipper might buy 5 couches in a week. Like just the amount of couches that are in their hands and they list for sale, like they have a much better idea of like, how much can I sell a couch for? And I've seen couch flippers sell used couches for more than what they're new, like more than their value brand new at retail.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we've done it ourselves a couple times.
Yeah. Wow.
And part of it is like there's value add, right? So sometimes if you want new couch, and this was a big problem during the pandemic, and this also affected cars and affected like almost all the different resale industries, is the supply chain was broken down. So if you wanted a new couch, maybe you had to wait like 6 months to 12 months for that couch to show up. Whereas like used, it's instant gratification. Like I can get that today if I wanted, delivered to me, already assembled. So these are all different ways that couch flippers add value that potentially can drive up the pricing for their couches beyond what people will pay for new. It's rare though. Generally, I think a quality used couch sells for something like 40-50% of retail. It's a good rule of thumb.
And is it also where, let's say the older the car, not the older the car, the older the couch gets, like the more it'll depreciate type of thing? Or
generally, yes. But I mean, if you're dealing with like certain brand names, designer, vintage kind of pieces, then it's different. But that requires really specialized knowledge in interior design and the materials that you're working with. I think most of the couch flippers that we work with kind of just dabble in what's popular, sort of like modern, like mid-century modern, like big sectional things, neutral colors, things that are in high demand rather than really one-off expensive pieces. Although, you do see people making a business off of that as well.
Yeah, I got you. And of course, I mean, during the pandemic time, that switched up a lot of different markets. Even even for the car stuff, I mean, I'm pretty sure you've heard that you could potentially buy a car brand new, drive it for like a month and sell it back to the same, well, another dealership potentially and make more money off of it when that normally never happens. Usually the moment you take off with a lot, that car's value drops like 30% or so. Pandemic was crazy times, you know.
I mean, I have a crazy story about this too. So I moved to Mexico during the pandemic, and then I moved to New York where I just didn't need a car. And so I ended up selling my car in 2022. It was a 2013 Honda Accord XL. I bought it for $14,000. I bought it used for $14,000, and I put on 50,000 miles on it, and I sold it to Carvana in 2022 for $3,000 more than what I paid for it. So I made $3,000.
Wow, that's crazy. Flipped it back to a major car dealer. That's pretty wild in itself. 50,000 miles is a lot, by the way.
It's a lot of, yeah, I know. It was like 80,000 total, right? So I put on like 10,000.
Taking some long commutes to stack up that much miles that quick.
Yeah, so I lived in East Pennsylvania. I went to school in Pittsburgh, and so I was frequently doing like 5 hours on the turnpike back and forth. So I think that's where most of the miles came from. So highway miles, but I got it serviced at the dealer. You know, I bought it from a dealer, got it serviced at the dealer. I learned eventually to stop doing that. Like, 'cause I was just a noob, you know, I didn't know anything about cars. I'm like, there's something about getting it serviced at the dealer, gave me that peace of mind, but I realized like I shouldn't be paying $150 for an oil change or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. But yeah, it was, I mean, it's wild that you could still do that though.
Yeah. And working and selling to Carvana made that entire process so easy. Like if I had to go and list that car for sale myself on Facebook Marketplace at the time, not knowing what I know now about like flipping and how much money you can make flipping things on these private markets, I wouldn't have done it at the time, but I literally just kind of put in the information in Carvana and they instantly spit out a quote and they came to pick it up like the next day.
Wow. That's crazy. And made $3,000 off of all that.
Made $3,000. But now I hear like the car, I think they're bankrupt.
Yeah. It's a lot of like things like.
If you could share with our audience your number one top flip of all time, what would it be?
So I would say, I guess my best one was a Mercedes. It was like a 2006 Mercedes that I got. I mean, the crazy thing was that I bought it for a really cheap price. It was actually like, it was kind of like a 2-for-1 deal too. I saw it off of Facebook actually. And when I went there, I mean, the car, it looked like it needed a little bit of work, but regardless, I was like, okay, I mean, the worst thing that would happen would be to just buy the car and then junk it and basically get my money back. So I purchased it for probably like $700 or so. And the guy actually who was selling another car, he's basically like his wife was getting at him because he couldn't clean the lot up. So he wanted to sell another car that he had also. I basically got like a 2-for-1 deal where I got the other car for like $500 also. It didn't, both of them, when I got it back home, they really didn't need much work. The Mercedes just needed a battery. So I just popped the battery in and the problem that I thought was actually there just went away on its own. And the other car, it was an Audi also. And it was kind of the same thing. Like, you know, when I got it home, whatever reason, the little bit of problems that it looked like it had when it was there, it actually just seemed like the main problem itself for both of the cars was just that it was sitting for a while. So they just went away on their own. Both of them I sold for probably about like $3,000 to $4,000 more than I bought them for. So let's say I bought one for like $600 to $700 and sold it for like close to $4,000 and did the same thing with the other one. So, and it sold within a couple of days too. So it wasn't even like I was sitting there waiting for, you know, weeks for it to sell. Like bought them. I was like, okay, cool. They don't need much. Sold them a couple of days later.
Amazing. Low upfront capital cost, quick flips, didn't require much work on your end, and 500% profit. Not bad.
Yeah, it was crazy. I was like, hey, you should let me know when you got another one coming. You know, I'll buy the next one off you.
If you could think back, what is the worst flip that you've ever done?
I would say the worst one would probably be a car that I purchased. I mean, I will say, to be honest, it's not too bad for me just because, again, I'm not someone that takes crazy risks. But there was a car that I purchased. It was a Nissan. It was a Nissan Rogue. I purchased it for probably around like close to $2,000 for it. As for people watching this, by the way, watch out for Nissans that have CVT transmissions. They just are not the best transmissions for cars, especially when they're using stuff. Like they can go from like, all right, driving all good to being bad, just like that. And they're expensive to fix too. But I bought it for $2,000 or close to $2,000. There was one time I was driving it around. I was trying to take it on like an exit ramp and the thing just stopped running. Like I couldn't even go off the thing. I had to pull over to the side of the road, get AAA to take the car back home. And yeah, I ended up finding out that it was a transmission that was bad with it. So I had to sell it pretty soon after that. But honestly, I didn't lose a crazy amount of money. I probably lost like $600 to $700 for it. I think I sold it for maybe like $1,300 after that. So, but it was a quick loss. I bought it for close to 2,000 one day and then down $600 to $700 kind of sucked. But to be honest, there's people I've heard that's lost way more than that off of a bad car flip. That's why I kind of say like it could be worse, truthfully.
Absolutely. And an important lesson on why risk management is so important when flipping. It's better to minimize your losses than try to maximize your gains on every flip. And I think that's a good rule of thumb. Jamaul, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. I think this has been very informational for our audience who wants to get into car flipping. If they wanted to connect with you, learn from you, absorb some of your content, what's the best way for them to get in touch or follow you?
My YouTube channel is called Flipping University. I would definitely say to check out that content, but I would honestly say the best thing for you guys either would be going through that auction route that I mentioned. For if you want to get your own dealer's license, we could easily jump on a call there. Or actually, if as another thing, there's also a checklist that I put together just in case you don't want to go the whole route of getting dealer's license and stuff like that. You could actually use it to be able to get like a high profit car without having to be fixing the car, which is honestly probably most of the people that are even watching this. Maybe you might be someone that, doesn't have a lot of mechanical knowledge in itself. So you could use this checklist, bring it with you, whether you're going to a car, the private sale that you need to buy or going to an auction, and you can just go through the checklist and get the right car that you need to get for the flip. But that's the main thing I really wanted to give to your audience, honestly. And dealer's license thing, that's kind of just another avenue if you want to go that route as well.
Okay, amazing. And we'll make sure to have a link to these resources in the description of this video. Thank you so much for joining me and look forward to chatting with you in the future soon.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.